It's just this sort of old guard, Ezra, the Laurentian elite old guard that's clinging to their power, and Justin Trudeau is enabling them. But it's not going to be much longer. Sooner or later, these media companies will die. The fact that they're on the dole, they're reliant on Trudeau, it just shows that they're very much on their last legs here.
Well, I was stunned a few months ago to see the list of Canadian media companies that took a special $61 million pre-election payout from Justin Trudeau's media bailout program. 1,500 names. Names of companies. I did not know there were 1,500 media companies in this country. Now, to be fair, Post Media, which has dozens of titles, each one of them was on the list, but that just makes it all the more shocking. And so when I say that 99% of the Canadian media is on the take, that is not an exaggeration. In fact, it's probably more like 99 and 44 100ths, as Dove used to say. But one of the very few media outlets that, like us, doesn't take any money from Trudeau, and it shows, are our friends at True North. And joining us now for a special year-end interview is our friend Candice Malcolm, the founder of True North. And I'm sure you're a subscriber at tnc.news. And if you're not, please go there and fix that. Candice, great to see you again. And congratulations on a banner year for tnc.news. Great to see you.
Thank you so much, Ezra. It's really interesting because you see, we have this media scenario where all of these media companies are beholden to the government, and yet they're shrinking. No one's watching them. People aren't tuning in. They're shedding jobs. They're laying off journalists. Meanwhile, independent journalists and outlets like The Rebel and True North are seeing huge success. We had an amazing year in 2021. We nearly doubled in size, and it is because Canadians are choosing with their wallets. They don't like the legacy media. They don't like what they have to offer, and they want something different. And I think that's so evident, so obvious at this point that it's a great time to be in independent media, but it's a sad state of affairs in our country when so many journalists go hat in hand to the federal government for money. It's such a conflict of interest. It's so wild, Ezra.
Yeah, and you know what? I've noticed that now that Trudeau has broken that taboo of literally paying cash to the journalists that cover him, others are saying, oh, so that's how it is in Canada, this sort of soft corruption, everyone's in on it, so no one talks about it. It's sort of a cartel, and the suckers are the public, because there's no disclosure. When a media party outlet talks about Justin Trudeau, interviews Trudeau, they don't say, brought to you by Trudeau. They keep that conflict of interest, I'm not going to say a secret, although that $61 million list I talked about was kept confidential. Imagine that, 1,500 people keeping a secret. I didn't even know that was possible. But others are getting into the game. So Facebook and Google, they give millions of dollars to media companies too. And they say, oh, it's because we're so beneficent. No, I think it's to color the media coverage of big tech and their censorship. And of course, China, the People's Republic of China, now buys huge infomercial style advertorials in the Globe and Mail and other huge newspapers. So I think that everybody knows the media in Canada is for sale. And I just think it's terrible for our democracy. I don't know any other country that calls itself free that lets its media be rented out like that.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I think that the China thing is really troubling. But you're right, the principle is there. Once you know that the media is for sale and they're there for hire, other less sort of benevolent forces may move in. You may think, oh, the Canadian government, they're a good guy, they're our ally, that's us, they're our friends, and we trust them. But when it comes to countries like China and other countries, Iran as well, paying. You wouldn't even know, Ezra. You're reading the Globe and Mail thinking that you're reading news stories, and actually an entire page is sponsored by China, and you don't even know about it. The way that I like to think about it, and I boil it down, is it's sort of the 3 Bs of Canadian media, right? So we know they're biased. We know that journalists are left-wing. They've always been left-wing. They've always been in the tank for the Liberals or maybe the NDP in the U.S. They're obviously Democrats. It's so patently obvious. So we have that one. They're biased. In Canada, they're beholden, because how can you criticize a government, Ezra, that you're reliant upon to pay your bills. Media is dying. Media is shrinking. They don't have the advertising revenues, as you mentioned. That's all gone to Facebook and Google, and that's its own separate problem. But because of that, the media companies, they can't really truly criticize Trudeau in a meaningful way, in the way that you would expect journalists to do. Ezra, the role of a journalist is to expose corruption, expose failed policies, expose the inner workings of the government. How could the media expose those things when they need Justin Trudeau? Otherwise, they're going to get laid off. Their companies are going to go out of business, or with regards to the CBC, they're going to collapse. We see every year the advertising revenue at the CBC falls. So they're biased, they're beholden, and the third B, which I think is the worst offense, is that they're boring. There's so much groupthink. There's so much just repeating the same narrative. They basically take their talking points from the Liberal Party every morning and they push that out. They attack the Conservatives with that. They push out their news reports on the pandemic and on the vaccines. They don't look like news reports, Ezra. They look like infomercials, and it's so laughable. But there's no contrarian attitude. There's no pushback. There's no. We even see in the U.S. Newspapers and magazines that are on the left. There was a long piece in The Atlantic, which is a left-wing magazine, similar to Maclean's, all about how the numbers with COVID were massively inflated, right? We saw a long piece in Vanity Fair about how masking children was wrong. And just because, some doctor out there says that it might be a good idea to put masks on little children, I'm talking about 5, 6-year-olds, that's not a good idea. So you see a variety of opinions and perspectives in the U.S. media that you just wouldn't see in Canada. In Canada, it's all groupthink. They all have the same opinion. They all have the same bland, boring approach to reporting the news, reporting the political news. There's nothing interesting going on. And so those three Bs are why I think that the media is just completely it's a dead industry. It's dead and dying. I think that they don't realize it yet. Younger people and anyone under 30 doesn't even engage with the legacy media. They don't even care what they're saying. They're not even aware of what they're saying. They've already moved on to new forms of technology and new ways of gaining information. It's just this sort of old guard, Ezra, the Laurentian elite old guard that's clinging to their power, and Justin Trudeau is enabling them. But it's not going to be much longer. Sooner or later, these media companies will die. The fact that they're on the dole, they're reliant on Trudeau, that just shows that they're very much on their last legs here.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.